The whispers followed Zara Ellis like a shadow through the dusty streets of Willow Creek, Montana Territory, 1878. Ruined, they called her, those cruel voices that had once greeted her with kindness before Thomas Blackwell had taken advantage of her innocence and abandoned her with nothing but a tarnished reputation. At 22, Zara found herself cast out from the boarding house where she'd worked, her meager possessions stuffed into a worn carpet bag as she stood in the harsh summer sun with nowhere to go. "You'll find no decent work in this town, girl," Mrs. Pearson had told her with cold eyes as she'd shut the door. "Not after what you've done," what she'd done. As if trusting the wrong man had been her crime alone. Zara gripped her bag tighter, fighting back tears as she walked toward the edge of town. Her honey blonde hair was pinned severely under her bonnet, her blue dress once her Sunday best, now her only respectable garment. The money in her pocket would last a week if she was careful, but after that. A commotion near the general store caught her attention. A tall cowboy was loading supplies into a wagon, his broad shoulders straining against his shirt as he hefted a barrel. She'd seen him before Flynn Yates, one of the hands from the Double R ranch that lay 10 miles outside town. Flynn was known as a quiet man, hardworking and honest, with a reputation for standing his ground when necessary. His sandy brown hair fell across his forehead as he worked, and when he straightened, his gray eyes seemed to look right through the crowd, settling on her. Zara quickly averted her gaze. Men like Flynn Yates didn't associate with women like her, not anymore, not since the whispers had started. She hurried on, unsure where she was heading but knowing she couldn't stay in town another night. "Miss Ellis." The voice startled her, and she turned to find Flynn Yates approaching, his long strides eating up the distance between them. At 28, he carried himself with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin. "Mr. Yates," she acknowledged quietly, bracing herself for whatever unkindness might follow. "I heard what happened at the boarding house," he said, his voice low enough that passers-by couldn't hear. "Do you have somewhere to go?" The unexpected concern in his voice nearly broke her composure. "I'll manage, Mr. Yates, Flynn," he corrected, then glanced at her bag. "Mrs. Rodriguez at the ranch is looking for help with the cooking and laundry. It's honest work, good pay." Zara stared at him in disbelief. "Why would you offer that to me? You know what they're saying." Flynn's expression hardened slightly. "I know what they're saying. I also know Thomas Blackwell is a lying snake who's done this before. The difference is the other girls had family to protect them." "And I don't," Zara whispered. "The offer stands," Flynn said simply. "Wagon leaves in 20 minutes if you're interested." He walked away before she could respond, leaving Zara standing in the middle of the street with a choice that wasn't really a choice at all. 20 minutes later, she climbed onto the wagon bench beside Flynn, ignoring the scandalized looks from townsfolk who surely thought she'd fallen even further. The journey to the Double R ranch passed in relative silence. Flynn wasn't a man of many words, and Zara was too lost in her thoughts to attempt conversation. The Montana landscape stretched before them, rolling hills dotted with pine trees, the distant mountains purple against the sky. It was beautiful in a wild, untamed way that made her own troubles seem smaller. "Ranch is just over that ridge," Flynn finally said as they crested a hill. "Boss is a fair man, Augustus Reed. His wife passed last winter. They've got a daughter, Lucy, who's 12. They won't judge you by town gossip." "Why are you helping me?" Zara asked, the question that had been burning in her mind since his offer. Flynn kept his eyes on the trail ahead. "My sister was in a similar situation once. Nobody helped her." He didn't elaborate further, but the shadow that crossed his face told Zara everything she needed to know. The Double R ranch sprawled across the valley, a large main house, bunkhouse, barn, and various outbuildings surrounded by corrals and pastures where cattle grazed. As they approached, a woman in her 50s emerged from the house, wiping her hands on her apron. "Mrs. Rodriguez," Flynn explained. "She runs the household." The woman regarded Zara with curious but not unkind eyes as Flynn made introductions. There was no mention of Zara's situation in town, just that she was looking for work and Flynn had offered her the position. "We need the help," Mrs. Rodriguez said with a nod. "Come inside, I'll show you where you'll stay." The small room off the kitchen was simple but clean: a narrow bed, a chest of drawers, and a small window overlooking the vegetable garden. It was more privacy than Zara had enjoyed at the boarding house, and certainly more than she'd expected to find today. "Thank you," she said softly to Flynn as he set her bag inside the door. "Just do good work," he replied. "The rest will sort itself out." Over the next few weeks, Zara settled into life at the Double R. The work was hard but satisfying, helping Mrs. Rodriguez with meals for the ranch hands, doing laundry, tending the garden. Young Lucy Reed took to following Zara around, hungry for female companionship after losing her mother. Augustus Reed was indeed fair, paying Zara the wage he'd promised and treating her with distant respect. And then there was Flynn. She caught him watching her sometimes as she hung laundry or carried water from the well. He never approached her directly, but he was always there fixing the step that creaked outside the kitchen, bringing fresh venison after a hunting trip, defending her quietly when one of the newer ranch hands made a crude remark after learning where she'd come from. "Flynn's sweet on you," Mrs. Rodriguez observed one evening as they prepared supper. "Never seen him pay this much mind to any woman before." "He pities me," Zara corrected, though her heart quickened at the thought. "That man doesn't have pity in him," Mrs. Rodriguez replied with a knowing smile. "Pride, stubbornness, and a good heart, but not pity." Summer faded into autumn, bringing with it cattle drives and the bustle of harvest. Zara found herself working alongside Flynn, more often helping to preserve food for winter, mending clothes torn during the roundup, occasionally riding out to deliver meals to the men working the far pastures. It was during one such delivery in late October that things changed between them. Zara was riding back to the ranch, the empty food baskets secured to her saddle, when her horse stepped in a prairie dog hole and stumbled. She managed to stay mounted, but the horse came up lame, unable to bear her weight for the 3-mile journey back. "Steady now," she soothed the animal, dismounting to examine its leg. She was so focused on the horse she didn't hear the rider approaching until his shadow fell across her. "Trouble?" Flynn asked, dismounting in one fluid motion. "She's lame," Zara explained. "I think it's just a strain, but she can't carry me back." Flynn examined the horse, his capable hands gentle as he checked the leg. "You're right, she'll be fine with rest, but we shouldn't ride her." He straightened, looking at the darkening sky. "Storm's coming in." "We'd better head for the line shack over the ridge. We can wait it out there." The first fat raindrops were falling as they reached the small cabin. Flynn helped Zara dismount from his horse, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. Inside, the line shack was basic but serviceable: a small stove, a rough-hewn table with 2 chairs, and a narrow cot against one wall. "I'll get a fire going," Flynn said, moving to the stove while Zara stood awkwardly in the center of the single room. The rain intensified, drumming on the roof as thunder rolled across the sky. Despite the growing warmth from the stove, Zara shivered, her dress damp from the rain. "Here," Flynn said, handing her a wool blanket from a shelf. "You should get out of that wet dress." At her startled look, he added hastily, "I'll step outside to check on the horses." "In this downpour, don't be ridiculous," Zara replied, finding courage from somewhere. "Turn your back." Flynn obliged, facing the wall while Zara quickly removed her wet outer clothes, wrapping the blanket around herself like a shawl over her chemise and petticoat. "You can turn around now." The small cabin suddenly felt even smaller as Flynn turned to face her, his own shirt damp enough to cling to the contours of his chest. He cleared his throat, gesturing to the cot. "You should rest, I'll take the floor." "Flynn," Zara said softly, "why have you been so kind to me?" He stared at her for a long moment, the firelight casting shadows across his face. "Because you deserved better than what happened to you. Because I've watched you work without complaint, care for Lucy like she was your own sister, and face down every sideways glance from visitors to the ranch with your head held high." "Is that all?" she asked, her heart pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. Flynn took a step toward her. "No," he admitted. "That's not all." The kiss, when it came, was gentle at first, a question more than a demand. But when Zara responded, her arms sliding around his neck, Flynn deepened the kiss with a hunger that matched her own. For the first time since the scandal had erupted, Zara felt wanted for herself, not for what she could give or what could be taken from her. They didn't go beyond kisses and tender touches that night, but something fundamental had changed. When they returned to the ranch the next morning, riding double on Flynn's horse, Zara knew her life had shifted course once again. 2 weeks later, Flynn approached Augustus Reed and formally asked for permission to court Zara. The rancher looked between them with shrewd eyes before nodding his approval. "About time, Yates. Was wondering when you'd get around to it." Their courtship was brief by most standards: long walks in the evenings, quiet conversations by the corral, a few kisses stolen in the shadow of the barn. But Zara had learned that time wasn't what mattered. It was understanding and respect, qualities Flynn showed her every day. When the first snow fell in early December, Flynn proposed. They were walking back from checking the chicken coop, their breath fogging in the cold air, when he stopped and took her gloved hands in his. "I know it hasn't been long," he said, uncharacteristically hesitant, "and I'm not a wealthy man. I've saved enough for a small place of our own someday, but for now it would mean living in the married hands cabin here at the ranch." "Flynn, let me finish," he interrupted gently. "I love you, Zara, not despite what happened, not because of it, but for who you are. I want to build a life with you if you'll have me." Tears froze on her lashes as she nodded, unable to speak past the emotion tightening her throat. Flynn's smile was radiant as he pulled a simple gold band from his pocket, his mother's ring. He explained and slipped it onto her finger over her glove. "We'll marry before Christmas," he decided. "No sense in waiting." The wedding was small, held in the ranch house parlor with only the ranch inhabitants present. Mrs. Rodriguez had sewn Zara a new dress of deep blue wool, and Lucy had woven wildflowers preserved from autumn into a crown for her hair. Pastor Miller rode out from town to perform the ceremony, tactfully ignoring the whispers that had undoubtedly reached his ears about the bride. "I, Flynn, take you, Zara." His voice was strong and sure as he recited his vows, his gray eyes never leaving hers. "I, Zara, take you, Flynn." Her own voice trembled slightly, still unable to believe this good fortune that had come from such despair. The married hands cabin became their home, 2 rooms with a small kitchen, more space than either had expected. Flynn carried her over the threshold that evening, setting her down gently in what was now their home. Their wedding night was tender and passionate, Flynn's patience and Zara's trust creating something beautiful between them. Afterward, as they lay tangled together beneath the quilts, Zara traced the line of his jaw with her fingertips. "I never thought I'd have this," she confessed. "After everything that happened, I thought I was ruined." Flynn captured her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "You were never ruined, Zara. Hurt, yes. Wronged, absolutely, but never ruined." Winter deepened around their small cabin, but inside was warmth and love and a future taking shape. By February, Zara suspected she was with child. By March, she was certain. "A baby," Flynn whispered when she told him, his hand spread reverently over her still flat stomach. "Our baby." The news spread quickly through the ranch, met with genuine congratulations from most. Augustus Reed increased Flynn's wages, acknowledging the coming addition to his family. Lucy was ecstatic at the prospect of a baby to help care for. Even Mrs. Rodriguez, normally reserved, knitted a tiny blanket for the coming child. But peace was never guaranteed in the Montana Territory, especially when the past remained unresolved. In early April, Thomas Blackwell rode into the Double R, ostensibly looking for work. Zara was in the garden when she heard his voice, and her blood ran cold. Flynn was out checking fence lines, and Augustus was in town on business. Thomas spotted her before she could retreat to the house, his handsome face breaking into a smile that once would have made her heart race but now turned her stomach. "Well, well," he drawled, approaching the garden gate, If it isn't Zara, heard you'd landed on your feet out here. Mr. Blackwell, she acknowledged stiffly, one hand instinctively moving to protect her barely visible pregnancy. We're not hiring. Thomas's eyes followed the movement, his expression changing to something calculating. I see congratulations are in order. Didn't waste any time, did you? Who's the lucky man? One of the cowhands desperate enough to take damaged goods. That would be me. Flynn's voice cut through the air like a whip. He'd returned unnoticed and now stood behind Thomas, his face a mask of controlled fury. And you'd best watch your tongue when speaking about my wife. Thomas turned slowly, sizing up Flynn with the practiced eye of a man used to sizing up potential opponents. Whatever he saw made him take a step back. No offense meant, he said, raising his hands in a placating gesture, just catching up with an old friend. We're not friends, Zara said, finding her voice. We never were. You lied to me, used me, and then spread rumors that ruined my reputation. Come now, darling. Flynn moved with startling speed for a man his size, his hand closing around Thomas's collar. She's not your darling, she's my wife. And you're leaving this ranch right now. For a tense moment, Zara thought Thomas might fight back. Instead, he laughed, the sound hollow and mean. Fine, keep her. Everyone knows what she is. A woman of strength and integrity, Flynn replied evenly. Which is more than anyone will ever say about you. Now ride out before I forget I'm a civilized man. Thomas backed away, heading for his horse, but at the last moment he turned to Zara with a sneer. Just so you know, you weren't special. There were others before you and there'll be more after. I know, Zara replied calmly. That's why I wrote to them. Thomas's face went slack with surprise. 6 letters, Zara continued, drawing strength from Flynn's presence beside her. 6 women you did this to in different towns. We've all compared stories now. The sheriff in Helena is particularly interested in the jewelry that went missing from Melissa Porter's room after you left her. It was a bluff she hadn't written to anyone, but Thomas's reaction told her she'd struck a nerve. He mounted quickly, spurring his horse harder than necessary as he galloped away from the ranch. Did you really write those letters? Flynn asked when Thomas was out of sight. No, Zara admitted, but I should have. There are others out there like me, Flynn, women he's hurt. Flynn wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close. You're nothing like them, Zara. You're stronger. You faced him down. Only because you were here, she whispered against his chest. No, Flynn disagreed, tilting her face up to his. You faced him down because that's who you are. I just had the privilege of witnessing it. That night, as they lay in bed discussing names for their child, Zara realized the last of her shame had evaporated in that confrontation. Thomas Blackwell had no power over her anymore, not her happiness, not her future, not her sense of self-worth. Summer came to the Montana Territory in a riot of wildflowers and long, golden evenings. Zara's pregnancy progressed, her body softening and rounding as their child grew. Flynn doted on her, bringing her wildflowers, rubbing her swollen feet in the evenings, and speaking softly to her belly when he thought she was asleep. In August, Augustus Reed called Flynn to his study for a private conversation. Flynn returned to their cabin an hour later, his expression unreadable. What is it? Zara asked, alarmed by his silence. Reed's offering us a chance to buy the north section of the ranch, Flynn said, still sounding stunned. 200 acres, including the creek and that stand of pines. Said he's getting too old to manage the whole spread and Lucy will eventually marry and move on. Can we afford it? Zara asked, practical despite her excitement. With my savings and the money Reed's willing to loan us, yes, Flynn nodded slowly. We could build a proper house there, Zara. A home for our family. Our family, she repeated, taking his hand and placing it on her rounded belly where their child kicked vigorously. I think someone approves of the plan. Construction on their house began immediately, with Flynn and the other ranch hands working whenever they could spare time from regular duties. By early September, the frame was up, a modest but solid 4-room structure with a front porch facing the mountains. It's perfect, Zara declared, waddling around what would be their sitting room, her hands supporting her lower back. Flynn watched her with concern. You're tired. We should head back, she waved off his worry. I'm fine. The baby's not due for another month, but their son had other plans. That night, Zara woke to a sharp pain and a rush of fluid soaking the bed. "Flynn," she gasped, clutching his arm. "The baby's coming." What followed were 18 hours of the hardest work Zara had ever done. Mrs. Rodriguez served as midwife, her experienced hands guiding Zara through the labor while Flynn paced outside, periodically poking his head in despite Mrs. Rodriguez's protests that men had no place in a birthing room. "I need him," Zara insisted during a particularly difficult contraction. "Please?" After that, Flynn stayed, letting Zara crush his hand and supporting her back as she pushed. When their son finally entered the world with a lusty cry, the look of wonder on Flynn's face was something Zara knew she would remember until her dying day. "He's perfect," Flynn whispered, tears in his eyes as he cradled the swaddled infant. "Look what we made, Zara." They named him Samuel James Yates Samuel after Flynn's father, James after the brother Zara had lost to influenza as a child. He had Flynn's gray eyes and a dusting of blonde hair that promised to darken to his father's, sandy brown. Word of Samuel's birth spread through the territory, bringing visitors and gifts including, surprisingly, a handcrafted wooden cradle from Pastor Miller and his wife, delivered personally with their congratulations. It was a small gesture, but a significant one, a public acknowledgement that Zara was now a respectable married woman and mother, whatever gossip might have said before. By November, their house was finished enough to move in, though Flynn continued to work on details throughout the winter, building shelves, hanging doors, constructing a rocking chair for Zara to nurse Samuel in beside the fireplace. They celebrated Christmas in their new home, a small tree decorated with paper stars and dried berries, Samuel sleeping peacefully in his cradle. "I have something for you," Flynn said after they'd exchanged modest gifts, a new hat for him, a wool shawl for her. He presented her with a small wooden box, carefully crafted with roses carved into the lid. Inside was a silver locket on a delicate chain. "It's beautiful," Zara breathed, opening it to find a tiny lock of Samuel's hair carefully preserved inside. "There's something else," Flynn said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a folded document, handing it to her with unusual solemnity. Zara unfolded it, reading slowly. "This is the deed to the property, but it has my name on it too. It's our land, Zara, yours and mine equally." Flynn took her hands. "If anything ever happens to me, you and Samuel will never be at anyone's mercy. You'll have this home, this land, in your own right." In a world where women rarely owned property, it was an extraordinary gift not just of security, but of respect. Zara threw her arms around Flynn's neck, the locket clutched in her hand. "Nothing's going to happen to you. We're going to grow old together right here." "That's the plan," he agreed, holding her close. "But I wanted you to know that you'll never be cast aside again, not ever." Spring came early to Montana in 1880. The creek thawed, wildflowers carpeted the meadows, and Samuel took his first tottering steps across their front porch, falling into Flynn's waiting arms with a delighted giggle. At 10 months old, he was a sturdy, happy child with his father's quiet determination and his mother's expressive eyes. Zara watched them from the doorway, her hand resting absently on her stomach where another child was just beginning to make its presence known. She hadn't told Flynn yet, was waiting for the right moment to share the news that their family would grow again before the year was out. The ranch was thriving under their care. They'd added chickens and a milk cow, planted an orchard of apple trees that would bear fruit in a few years, and expanded the vegetable garden. Flynn had hired 2 hands to help with the cattle, building a small bunkhouse for them near the barn. It wasn't a large operation, but it was prosperous and growing. Occasionally, Zara still heard whispers when they went into town, sideways glances from people with long memories and small minds. But increasingly, she was known as Mrs. Yates, the capable wife of that hard-working rancher from the North Valley, mother to the most handsome boy in the territory. "What are you thinking about, looking so serious?" Flynn asked, coming up beside her with Samuel on his hip. "About how much has changed in 2 years," she replied honestly. About how close I came to missing all of this. Flynn set Samuel down to toddle inside after a toy, then pulled Zara into his arms. I thank God every day that I saw you standing there with your carpet bag, looking like you were facing a firing squad. I think I was, in a way, Zara mused. The end of one life, I just didn't know another one was about to begin. She took a deep breath, and it's about to change again. Flynn's brow furrowed. What do you mean? Zara took his hand and placed it on her stomach, still flat but holding their secret. By Christmas, Samuel will be a big brother. The joy that bloomed across Flynn's face was answer enough, but he swept her into his arms anyway, spinning her in a circle on their front porch. A baby, another baby. His enthusiasm made her laugh, dispelling the last shadow of that long-ago whisper ruined that sometimes still echoed in her darkest moments. How could she be ruined when she had built something so beautiful? That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple, Samuel sleeping against Flynn's chest, Zara finally gave voice to the feeling that had been growing in her for months. I'm happy, Flynn, truly happy. Flynn's arm tightened around her shoulders. That's all I ever wanted to give you. You've given me so much more, she whispered. A home, a family, a place where I belong. You gave those same things to me, he replied. I was just existing before you, going through the motions. The future stretched before them bright with promise, rich with possibility. There would be challenges, of course, drought years and harsh winters, children growing up and needing guidance, the everyday work of building a life together. But as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Zara knew with bone-deep certainty that whatever came, they would face it together. She had been called ruined once, cast aside by a town too quick to judge, but Flynn had seen beyond the whispers to the woman she truly was. He had married her, given her his name and his heart, and together they had created a family and a home where love was the foundation of everything. In the end, that was the truest measure of a person, not the mistakes they made or the misfortunes they suffered, but the love they gave and received. By that measure, Zara Ellis Yates was the richest woman in all of Montana Territory. And as Flynn kissed her softly in the gathering dusk, their son sleeping peacefully between them and another child growing beneath her heart, she knew that some things, once broken, could be rebuilt stronger than before.